Welcome, Facebook fans. Welcome to our next session of Hands That Heal. It is a podcast and Facebook Live for Claire Passage. Claire Passage Physical Therapy is a niche physical therapy that works on abdominal adhesions, working with small bowel obstructions, female infertility, endometriosis, chronic pain. Today we have a fabulous guest with us. Her name is Victoria, and she came to Claire Passage. And I'm going to go ahead and say, Victoria, can you tell us about yourself and what you did before Claire Passage and why you sought us out and all that kind of fun information?
Yeah, I don't know about fabulous. I think I paid you to say that. I'm a retired nurse, and I retired as a part of medical conditions, including the repeated obstructions that led to some other things. So I am still retired, and so I came to Clear Passage because I was looking for a solution. So simply being subject to the condition was not an answer. So just sitting at home waiting for the next super painful event to happen was not a solution. So I went seeking a solution, and that's how I stumbled onto Clear Passages.
Could you tell us what type of signs and symptoms you were having?
Yeah, so I'm a foodie, so I like to eat. And so the way I say it is what's mine stays mine. So I don't like the nausea and the vomiting. That's a deal breaker for me. So in addition to that, there's the severe pain. I mean, I'm a mother, so I know what it's like to give birth. And this was worse. I mean, it was to the point to where I would have to feel better to die. The pain was just that bad.
That sounds horrendous. Oh my goodness. How long was this going on for you? And do you know what started it, or is it more insidious?
Well, it's consistent with my underlying pathology, and so it would go on for hours. I mean, literally hours. Because when it got to the point to where it was going to be the next day, then that's time to get to the emergency room. And as you know, we're coming out of a pandemic, and so presenting to the emergency room or any healthcare facility there is risky, or certainly was at that time risky in and of itself. So it's not a decision that you make lightly. And so then the decision became, am I going to be able to resolve this by using just heat and massage? Or, is this something that I'm going to be found dead on my floor with? And that's not fun either.
Oh, that's scary, isn't it? What are some of the emotions that you were going through as you were looking for a solution?
So my emotions were primarily, why am I doing this on my own? I am not special, so I know that this is not unique to me. So what information is out there? So being someone that is in the healthcare profession, my first stop was to check with my friends that are still practicing physicians and researchers and internists, and then to look at the research and just to scan the landscape to see what was out there.
So how did you find Clear Passage, and what was the hook? What kind of brought you into keep looking more and more into us?
Yeah, so I heard about Clear Passages. I was on the Inspire website. Well, it's a social media group for people with long-term or chronic care conditions and things of that nature. And so I was on in one of the Inspire chat rooms, and someone mentioned it. And so from there, I started, the Google searches, the YouTube searches, the medical literature for peer-reviewed research searches and things of that nature. And so I gathered that material, and I know that bowel obstructions were not what Clear Passages was initially had initially found success in, but was starting to see some. And so I saw a potential solution for myself and for other people who were also seeking answers and not just willing to succumb to their conditions.
And in your research, you saw, even though Clear Passage didn't start with small bowel obstructions, we started with black fallopian tubes. There is research in peer-reviewed journals. So our data shows that Clear Passage is 15 times more effective than standard treatment in clearing total bowel obstructions, which is really amazing. That's, yeah.
I agree, because standard treatment was not really treating the condition, but just keeping you from dying from the condition, I think. Nobody wants to die from, and for lack of a better term, a ruptured bowel. It's not pretty for anyone. And so just like sinking an NG tube and keeping you NGO for days, that's not a solution. That's just passing you on to the next stage. So what I read in the research was very encouraging.
I have not had it, but my clients have told me that NG tube is actually probably one of the most horrendous things they've ever had to do.
Well, I think it's probably in my top 5.
Okay.
Yeah. So
NG tube and withering in pain on the bed, on the floor, not able to move.
That's not fun either. The NG tube was, it was not fun, and resulted in some impassioned disagreement between me and some of the providers that wanted to do that as a first intervention. And to do something invasive as a first step, it gives me cause for pause.
Yeah. Yeah. I am so sorry you had to go through that. Even hearing about it still, it's awful.
Yeah.
So you found us, you started researching us, and then you made a phone call. And what was that phone call like into the Gainesville office, is who you initially called?
Yeah, I felt more than encouraged. I felt welcomed, and I felt like led that this was the solution. So straight out of the gate, after reading the research and conferring with my friends who also read the research and found other data, I felt like this was what I was going to do, whether or not I had support from my personal medical team or not. This is what I was going to pursue, because doing nothing was not a solution.
You bring up a good point, but before we move further, Facebook fans, if you have any questions for Victoria or for myself, please just go ahead and post them, and we will answer them towards the end of the Facebook Live. So you said, with or without your medical team's approval, in the end run, did your medical doctors encourage you or discourage you from moving forward with Clear Passage?
Well, we work with the information that we have. And so because this was not something that my team was familiar with, although I provided them with the medical research and encouraged them to look into it a little bit more, the U.S. healthcare system is not streamlined. And so they have their protocols and their what do we call it? Their approval processes that they have to jump through. And so that was a challenge that I wasn't willing to continue cycling in. And so although my healthcare team, for the most part, were willing to listen, it was a new learning curve for them. And I'm not sure that having one patient or that I know of, I don't know that anybody else has brought this forward. I'm not sure that having one patient to bring this forward as a potential option was something they were willing to spend a lot of time independently researching.
Did you ever go back afterwards, after therapy, and talk to your team?
I did. I went back afterwards and let them know the success that I had, because a couple of them really were interested in learning more about it. And so I was able to share that information with them afterwards, and also my records, because the records were meticulously kept. And so I was able to share that with them also.
Yep. So I'm veering off course, but even though Clear Passage is fee for service, which means you pay before you come, we do have an initial eval, which is 7 pages long. We keep meticulous daily notes and charges and discharge notes. And you part of the medical profession, you found them pretty impressive then.
I did. But let me just back up with my healthcare providers and insurer. There was an option where they could have gotten approval to partially pay for the cost of care, but it was going to be time consuming, and there was no assurance, nor did I get any indication that it was going to be approved. And so I just moved forward and I let them know, I'm not going to keep jumping through hoops. This is what I'm doing. I'm just letting you know. And so from the beginning, the assessment process, I have conducted lots of physical exams and participated in conducting physical exams, but this was way more in-depth physiologically and anatomically. By that, I mean making sure what conditions the structures were in and how the structures interrelate with other systems. So it was way more in-depth than anything I had participated in. And so I was quite impressed with that.
Thank you. Thank you. Our evaluations take almost 2 hours just because we really want to see, we look from your posture to your range of motion, to how well your fascia is moving, how well the dura is moving, to how the organs are gliding on each other. Because we really want to see exactly where all these adhesions are pulling and stopping movement, increasing pain, and what else we could do to help the whole body gain function. So thank you very much for even recognizing that. It's a lengthy process, but we get a lot of information when we're going through it.
Even emotionally, making sure that, if I had any emotional or tension or stress causing issues going on. So that is a factor that we're learning a lot more about in the medical community. So that was also included in the assessment.
So what clinic did you finally decide to go to?
I went to the St. Louis clinic. That's the one that's closest to where I could get to.
And then who are we? Your therapist?
Yes.
So I was your therapist. And did you have, was it just me or did we have another therapist working with you too?
No, I had 2 therapists. I can't think of her name.
Mara was the other therapist.
Yes. I'm sorry. Don't tell her I forgot her name. Don't tell her.
That's okay. So in St. Louis and in Gainesville, we have a multiple person approach, which is wonderful, absolutely wonderful, because you get 2 sets of eyes or 3 sets of eyes working on you, 3 sets of hands or 2 sets of hands. So it's really nice. And then in New York and Detroit and Dallas and LA, there is a single practitioner. But every single therapist who ever puts their hands on a Clear Passage client first has a wealth of training underneath their belt. They have been in the profession multiple years as a manual therapist. Once we decide that we like a therapist and we want to hire them on, they've been through the interview process, and it's a very long interview process, and making sure that they have good hands and making sure they have good compassion, that they're listeners, because as Victoria can tell you, we actually listen to the clients and we listen to their bodies and we listen to the emotions of it. We just have to be good listeners all the way around and good practitioners. After all of that, we get flown down to Florida for an additional 100 hours of training per the WURN technique, WURN technique. And that's a technique that saves lives, opens up bowels, opens up fallopian tubes, helps endometriosis. And it's a technique, and even after I've been a manual therapist for 15 years, it's a technique that I did not know about until I actually was trained in it, like I said, for 100 hours. So no matter what clinic you go to, you're going to get a highly trained and skilled therapist. But Victoria, what was your treatment like? Can you describe it?
Yeah, it was a week-long treatment, and I definitely think it was well worth the cost and the effort because it's given me my life back. But it was not only was the manual treatment helpful. I mean, I could literally towards the end of the week after several sessions, I could literally feel when the adhesions would relax, and I would have. And the first time it was like super weird. I could actually feel movement, like a release of the restrictions. And the first time it was kind of funny because my leg jumped up like a reflex. It was kind of like, you know, but I think it was Mara that I was with, and she's seen it before, so it didn't surprise her. It just surprised me. So I could, before that week was up, I already felt improved. And so that's what it was like. It was like a manual release of the tension of at least one of my adhesions and then subsequently more.
So, questions that everybody wants to know. Was it extremely painful?
No, it wasn't. I guess some of it would depend on what you would consider painful or uncomfortable. I am more susceptible to. I don't like to feel itchy. And so there were a couple of times when the manipulation was going on because it's done with the fingers and the tips of the fingers, it felt itchy.
Right. And we were able to adjust around that if it started to drive you crazy.
I didn't need that. I was already crazy.
So, with treatment, we like to keep treatment under a 6 out of 10 with pain because we want to sneak in underneath that neurological system to help elongate tissues. And so if we, people say, is it real painful? Does it hurt? And the answer is no, because if it's really painful and if it hurts a lot, we're just tight all the time and we're constricted and we're not relaxing. So we really want to stay at that 6 out of 10 discomfort level. So we're able to have conversations, we're able to talk, we're able to take a nap if you want to, and we're able to really elongate that tissue as we don't pummel you. It's a nice, prolonged, relaxed type of treatment and modality. Wouldn't you agree?
I do agree with that. And having the conversation and having that rapport with the therapist was good as a distraction. So then I'm not thinking about, is this working? Is this not working? What is that? Is that itching and all of that? And then building up tension as the therapist is trying to alleviate tension.
So can you tell us how the treatment has helped?
Yeah, so I was a world traveler actually before this. Every year I would take 2 and sometimes 3 OCONUS trips, or out of the continental U.S. And because of my condition, I just couldn't do that because I could not predict, if I was going to have a complication. And no one wants to have a complication on an airplane at altitude in a place where you're not familiar. And so that's another reason why it was untenable to me to not have a solution and just to accept being restricted. And so since then, I continue to do home therapy that you guys taught to me before I was discharged. And so I've not been back to the hospital since I started treatment, and I'm able to travel again. Now, I'm not going to be taking any trips to Australia. A 14-hour trip doesn't appeal to me, even, outside of having a medical condition. But, I had and then the pandemic and all. So, but I have been able to travel. Had my most recent trip was to Hawaii, where I got to spend several days and enjoy the cuisine and the people and the sun. And so it's given me my life back.
That is so exciting. First of all, I know Mara and I loved hearing about your trips and everywhere you've been. Very well versed and well traveled. You're an amazing, amazing woman. And then when we got your email saying, "Oh, I'm going to Hawaii. Thank you so much." We shared it with everybody. We shared it with the owners, Belinda and Larry, and shared it amongst ourselves. But what was really interesting is that then people started giving tips. Therapists started sending tips. Oh, tell Victoria to do this while she's traveling to help prevent a bowel obstruction, or tell Victoria to do that. So even after Victoria was gone, she was still getting information, not just from me and Mara, but like the entire team, when they heard she was traveling and doing so well, which is amazing. It's always fun to hear about a pregnancy, about somebody getting their goals again, somebody running their marathon, traveling, being able to eat what you want to eat. Are you really restricted, Victoria, on your diet?
Yes, but that's more related to my underlying condition.
Okay. But you feel that with Clear Passage, you've opened up enough to eat what you can on the diet that you're allowed to have.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm able to manage myself quite well.
Wonderful. How often do you do your home exercise programs?
6 days a week.
That's wonderful. Good for you. Good for you. So adhesions can form with either surgery, trauma, inflammation processes, like Crohn's disease, SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, radiation treatment. So those are some of the reasons why we can get adhesions and small bowel obstructions. But even we don't know why necessarily we get blocked fallopian tubes, but they are tight and there's adhesions in there. And when we open those up, the fallopian tubes open also. And that research in itself is also amazing. It beats infertility treatments. I was going to have a question for you, Victoria. I forget what it was. Okay. Something about adhesions, but we'll figure it out. I'll remember in a minute. Okay. Do you have anything else you'd like to add, Victoria, before we move on?
Well, I can just describe some, what it might help someone out there to, themselves or someone else. So when you talk about adhesions, if you think about conceptually, if you think about them as rubber bands that lose elasticity over time. So these bands attached to different organs or structures, no rhyme and reason. They have no reason to be in the area, but they just decide to attach from, one organ to the other and just hang out. And then over time, they lose elasticity and they just get tighter and tighter. And then they stop the organs from, moving around and performing and things of that nature. And so the therapy that I do is with because there are different ways that you guys taught that we could stretch out those bands to get some relief, but what works for me is with the softball, just laying on a softball to release those. And again, there's rarely a time when I don't, and then I moved it around, of course, but there's rarely a time during my 6 days that I don't literally feel a release. So that's my story anyway.
That's great. I'm so glad you're still doing your home exercise program. And like Victoria was saying, especially if you have a process where your adhesions keep forming, then as you're doing the home exercise program, which your therapist will give you, you could start feeling those releases every single day. Could you imagine if you didn't do a home exercise program? sometimes we have clients come back and they say, oh, I haven't done my home exercise program in a while and I need help again. So you made the investment, you might as well do the home exercise program too.
Yeah, I don't have to imagine what it would be like. I have experienced it, when I ended up in the hospital for those times. So I'm not planning to waste the investment, and I don't need to go back to the hospital. I've never been that bored.
That's great. So what type of words or emotions would you use to describe your experience with Clear Passage and with treatment and with the life afterwards?
It's been overwhelmingly positive. I've had no negative effects whatsoever. None.
That's great. Good. We don't have any comments. Let me look.
I think there are a few questions.
Yeah, they are. Here we go. How does the therapy find the adhesions in the intestines? The therapists actually are highly trained and highly skilled hands, and we could actually feel that the organs are not moving on each other. They're just really tight. And like Victoria was saying, with no movement, there's no passage of food. So we're able to assess it after having our 100 hours worth of training. And then this question is for you, Victoria. Did you experience a pulling forward feeling from the small bowel obstructions or migraine issues? So did you ever feel pulled forward or migraines?
I feel the tension. I wouldn't say I felt pulled forward because I've had multiple surgeries. And so my adhesions developed at different times. So I have more than one. Some my clinical providers did schedule me for surgery and cut some. But for those that remained that they couldn't get to, I definitely feel the tension. No migraines related to my adhesions, though.
Just to answer this question, there are some patients that actually you could see them because we're doing an initial eval because of all that scar tissue that's being pulled forward. And then after treatment, we do another initial and or another postural eval, and we take pictures, and you could see how much straighter they are. And we did absolutely nothing to work on posture, but release all of this anterior tightness. And some of that could really do lead to migraines. So Victoria didn't have it, but it can be a possibility. How long after surgery can we start therapy? It has to be at least 12 weeks because we need to have a healing process started. Did you experience any leg or hip pain, Victoria?
I did have some hip pain, and so I wasn't for sure if that was arthritis, bursitis, or related to the adhesion, because I had all three. But I can tell you that during one of my home therapy sessions, I felt a release in that hip area. So it was all three.
Very good. And yes, I have a story of a gentleman who had multiple surgeries, like 18 abdominal surgeries. And when we've worked on his pelvis, and we actually did some internal work with him through the rectum to work on the pelvic floor and those hip muscles, he actually got up and was like, oh my gosh, I'm swiveling. This is the first time I swiveled in my hips since he's had all his surgeries. So great question. Great question. Another question, I had a colostomy, and since then I'm having issues with small bowel motility due to adhesions. Can you help? Yes, yes, yes. So the colostomy, an ileostomy, an ostomy does not make a difference. We can work under it. We can work around it. We work right next to it. And as long as it's adhesion related, yes, absolutely, we can help, because as those adhesions lengthen, you have more movement, and then you'll have more motility in your gut. And the next question is, I think we answered a little bit about this, but Victoria, did you feel the adhesions being released? And again, can you talk about the pain, how uncomfortable or comfortable you were during treatment?
I wasn't uncomfortable during treatment. Like I said earlier, sometimes it would feel itchy if the therapist's fingernails were, because the fingernails are on top of the abdominal area. So sometimes that would feel itchy. But could I feel the adhesions being worked on? I could feel the after effect. So by that I mean I can't feel when a specific adhesion is feeling tight, but I can feel when the organ is released. So I could feel the effect of the loosening of the adhesion.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I think that is very patient specific. Some patients could feel adhesions relaxing and lengthening, and some have more of a concept of, I feel really good when I get up off the table. And we talked about 12 weeks after surgery, and then can exercise like sit-ups trigger a bowel obstruction or caused by adhesions? Yes. I would hopefully it doesn't, but any type of movement or eating or anything when you have adhesions and you're moving on that adhesion, there's a stuck point. That adhesion is sticking to something. And so typically while you're doing sit-ups, your organs are supposed to be moving on each other. But if you have an adhesion and you're stuck, then you're kinking it more or making it more difficult for food to pass through. So I'm not saying it happens all the time, but absolutely it can cause an obstruction. Movement can cause an obstruction. Exercise, running can cause an obstruction. Actually, we've noticed even stress, because they're the gut-brain connection, the enteric connection, stress and an increase in stress level can cause an obstruction. So thank you so much, everybody, for your questions. Excellent questions. And I apologize for starting a little late today, scheduling issue, and I take full responsibility for that. But thank you so much for tuning in and waiting for us. Victoria, do you have anything else you'd like to say?
I do not.
Wonderful.
I appreciate you guys being there, and I'm glad I found you.
I'm glad you came too. It was wonderful speaking with you today. We have locations from LA to London, or the UK, LA, Dallas, St. Louis, Detroit region, Rochester, Gainesville, New York, and then in Canterbury and London. So we have multiple locations throughout the United States. Treatment is 20 hours a week. So you come in for an entire 20 hours for a week. So you fly into your location or drive into your location. Go ahead and call the office for cost because it varies by different diagnosis. And our office number is 352-336-1433. Again, that is 352-336-1433. And our website is www.clearpassage.com. And let me get you back over here. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, so much for coming. And Victoria, I really appreciate you coming today and sharing your story with us. You look wonderful, and I'm so glad I got to see you again.
My pleasure. I'm happy to help. If it helps somebody else, I'm here for that.
We do have a small bowel obstruction forum if you want to get on our Facebook page, and if you have more questions, you can ask them in there. Or, like I said, call the office, and one of our patient coordinators would love to talk to you and help you out. So until our next Facebook Live, which I believe is going to be infertility in December, hope everybody stays well and healthy. Happy Thanksgiving.